Today on What Went Wrong, it's the beginning of the end.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hi, I'm Brett Mauser, and within all of my films, I have sort of a cinematic universe. Not all films, but I've got a couple standalone. And within that ponderous cinematic universe, there are multiple timelines, multiple universes, parallel worlds.
Right.
But within those worlds, there are distinct little individual events that take place within all of the timelines. For instance, in the Innocent Saga, Mike's timeline and Diane's timeline, they both experience certain events, and that comes from my
Historical inevitabilities.
Exactly, and that sort of comes from my religious background and my religious faith that I do believe in free will, but I also believe in the plan. That there are certain things that are
just going to happen
that just go about. And one of those events in the Ponderous timeline is the Day of Seven Sisters, which is basically 7 nuclear attacks across the country,
right.
And that's what causes the split in the country.
After the Day of Seven Sisters, the United States broke up into 5 separate sovereign states. You are currently in the corporate states of America.
And gives us those different, the corporate states of the U.S., Republic of Texas, the California monarchy, and when the Mormons took over.
The Deseret, all those areas, yeah.
And what's with the Mormon coalition anyway? How did they take over Vegas? Why?
That came about by the beta hunters,
right?
The Bad Mojo girls.
The booty hunters, my favorite.
Your favorite, the booty hunters, get their hands on the 7 nuclear devices and are trying to destroy Donovan's labs, which are in 7 different cities across the country. And then one of them in San Antonio, in L.A.,
right.
Southern California, because Smokey. Who they got?
He partially armed one.
He partially armed one of them.
That one is complete.
What? What do you mean it's complete?
Hey, you asked me to get you 7. I got you 6 with no uranium, no plutonium, whatever they put into those things. The 7th one, well, that was just a little bit more difficult to get a hold of. The only one they had, well, it was intact.
You mean to tell me you brought us a live nuke?
Well, yeah, I mean, you were going to use them, right?
And they were using materials with orichalcum to set off the bombs.
Which what happens when you use uranium and orichalcum does things it's not supposed to do.
And mysteriously caused a zombie
outbreak. And a zombie outbreak comes.
All right, so pollen levels are low, mold is high, Z-spore levels from the fallout are extremely high due to southerly winds, so stay inside unless you want to get infected, like Maggie.
Because science.
That's always the fallback.
Movie science.
So in every timeline that comes about. And now the Day of Seven Sisters, oddly enough, happens today on March 10th when this episode is premiering.
Yay, we're all going to die.
Except it happened in 2012, so 10 years ago.
Yay, we didn't die.
We didn't die. But it did always mark the beginning of the end, because no matter what timeline it was, and numerology has always been and I say numerology not in sort of a spiritual or psychic sense.
The numbers happen because numbers in the movie world are cool to talk about and deal with, and it gives you a sense of foreboding, and that's a device, but it's a very good device.
Yeah, and mine came. The reason I got into numerology in films and whatnot is really because I would when you'd be sending a killer to an address. So here's the address, and you got to show the matchbook opening up. Well, what address am I going to put in there, or how do I decide what address is? So I would start putting family birthdays or something like that in. My mother's birthday is in an address of one, and that was the Day of Seven Sisters. There was the first girl I had a crush on in high school. Actually, like the second girl I had a crush on in high school.
There's so many.
Yeah, I don't blame me for that.
That's okay. There's a lot of hot girls there. It's fine.
One of those heartbreaking things.
Oh, I know.
So in like
we've all had those. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Late '90s, when I was thinking, okay, here's the event, the day that all hell breaks loose and it marks the end of the world. What I'm going to do? Oh, let's go with the birthday of that girl that broke my heart back then. So that's where March 10th came from.
So if your birthday's March 10th, we apologize, but we're not sorry. You brought about the end of the world. It's all because of you.
And I think you probably even know her.
I'm sure I do.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I do. I don't.
It started as a way to create the world that I wanted to live. I wanted my characters to live in, and that being sort of that the Watchmen.
You had to have that moment when the bad things, everyone's going along, and then this is when the thing happens that now your characters have to deal with. It's a plot device, and it's a fantastic plot device.
Yeah. I wanted to privatize law enforcement,
right?
And I wanted to have the two-man team, the Watchmen, the Watchmen team, the Serrano and the Dicer,
right?
And one would be the judge and jury, and one would be the executioner,
right?
And there was a whole backstory how Walter Baker was the first Watchman in Colorado, and he was judge, jury, and executioner, and other people started becoming Watchmen, but because of the judge, jury, executioner part, people would start getting snake eyes, and they would lose their mind.
Yeah.
So laws were put in place that you had to have two-man teams. And if you wanted a crime solved, you had to go to these guys and hire them. And it was an eye for an eye type thing. If you killed somebody, then the executioner would kill the person they found was guilty. There was an episode that I wrote. It was called a bottle episode. If anyone doesn't know for those who don't know what a bottle episode is, it's a cheap episode where everything takes place in just one room. It's done to save money, budget. Star Trek had a lot of bottle episodes,
right?
Because it all took place on the Enterprise, and they didn't have to build other locations. Well, it was all going to take place in in an apartment laundry place, where Isabella, who was the Serrano, and Walter was the Dicer, were just sitting around and talking the whole time, and it was like maybe flashbacks or telling a little bit about themselves, and then finally somebody comes in, puts their laundry in, and leaves, and then they get and steal the guy's laundry. Because they had been hired to find out who had stolen somebody's laundry, and they found out this was the guy that stole the laundry, so they had to go steal his laundry. So they couldn't. I think they didn't even come to think of it. I don't think they even waited because they have to announce themselves and say, "I am distributing the punishment." So Walter had to beat the guy up or put him to the side. So while Isabella's taking his clothes out of the washer and leaving.
Anthony Capello, you've been found guilty. The crime of sexual assault.
The punishment of that crime is death. Do you have anything to say before your punishment is executed? F*** you. Duly noted.
But it's played for a comedy, obviously.
That would be funny. I mean, this whole thing, you're going along, and then all of a sudden, that at the end, that would be funny as balls. Absolutely.
So I needed to create a world where that kind of mentality was permissible, and how it evolved into that. And in Blue Moon, we had Donovan go back to the Civil War, and I can't remember what he did, but he did something. He started introducing
technology.
Is
the problem. Yeah.
And that's how we got to the Blue Moon world that you were in.
Because basically all it was, I don't think the Civil War ended any differently as I recall, but what happened was we started getting introduced to technology that wasn't going to exist for the 100 years. So we're basically 100 years ahead. So you had the 1940s and you've got laser bleed, all kinds of crazy, So basically we just jumped the world ahead 100 to 150 years ago. Space travel in the 30s and all kinds of crazy stuff.
And that was my way of being able to do a 40s film and not have to worry about all the locations. Right. And I could have present day guns and
we could be fashion forward in the 40s, but technology of the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s.
Yes. Yes, which as you can see in all of my films, the 40s impact is even in Tag Conspiracy.
You always do 40s stuff. It's always got to be there. But let's be honest, that's a cool period to film and do stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, LA Noire isn't there just because people like Los Angeles. It's because it's freaking cool.
Yeah, exactly. So and then we eventually did, and that's when it was in 2000 when I started looking at doing The Watchmen as a television series. That I then threw it ahead in time. Now I was going to make the U.S. At that point, there was a conflict because I was going to make the U.S. the bad guys, because they were thrown into war, and the Day of Seven Sisters happened, and the U.S. didn't do anything, so Texas broke away so that they could go and do it. But that actually changed after 9/11 because we were plotting it out, and a couple people, even Scott Neff and I, were kind of plotting and thinking about different ideas. And before 9/11, and it was somehow, I can't remember exactly how it worked, but the U.S. was the bad guy.
Right.
And Texas broke away for that reason. And then 9/11 happened, and then patriotism kicked in, and I didn't want to make the U.S. the bad guy, so I put it as exterior forces that came and nuked it.
Right.
And then we made a little half-hour pilot with DeMarcus. And,
I remember that.
And Scott Neff as Ranger Marshal.
Right.
Good morning, Esteban.
And then that was just sort of to test it out and to play around with it, and it continued to evolve, and then it evolved into the Night Watchman. It was originally the Watchman, that then the comic or the graphic novel became popular, and I was like, okay, let's change it back to the Night Watchman, because he was always called the Night Watchman.
Right.
The Watchman just sounded like a cool name.
It is. That's why they used it. It's a cool name. Yeah.
It's the year 2024, and Temple, Texas has changed. Coming to News 25 this November, The Watchmen, a new, independent, locally produced TV series shot on location right here in Central Texas. And only News 25 will bring it to you.
Are you crazy?
More than likely. Don't miss the first 2 pilot episodes shown back-to-back, premiering Saturday after the Night Beat, only on News 25.
So then it evolved into the Day of Seven Sisters in terms of nuclear attacks, terrorist nuclear attacks.
Right.
And at that point, it wasn't the beta hunters that were involved. We never really delved into what happened, but that was the reason that everything broke up. And then as things progressed, I started being able to put the politics into it, and especially in 06, 07, you could start seeing where California was headed. It's like, okay, that's going to be a communist monarchy.
There will be no more capitalism. No more oppression.
It's about time they came out and admitted it. Liberal common Nazis over there.
Shut up.
Texas is going back to its roots, and it's the republic, and I just started breaking it up. One of my favorite things, fascinating things happened was my mother knew about the Night Watchman and everything and how the country had broken up. And then she had sent me something that I don't even know how she found it, but Glenn Beck had somebody on their show who was a social scientist or whatever. Mm-hmm. And after I had created The Watchmen and how the country broke up, this guy came on and he wrote a book using sociology and psychology and economics and all this, and split up the country and said, this is the way the country's going to be someday. And it had very similarly broken up the way my country had.
Sociology is what sociology is, and you can deny it all you want, but it's that is an actual science.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can look at the numbers and the data, and you could see California is on its way to psychosis. Canada will eventually, it's the same thing I've said about the British. Don't think for 1 second that the British aren't the same despotic psychopaths they've been for the past hundreds of thousands, or not hundreds of thousands, but the past 1,000 years, and you can see it in all the British colonies, Australia, Canada, and Britain. They're all going completely psycho left because they're British. That's what they do. Anyone who thinks otherwise doesn't understand the science of it. It doesn't understand the sociology of it. It's there to be seen if you kind of want to take a look at it. It's not one of these like, do your research. I mean, just take a look. Just take a look at stuff and just kind of see how things are going and take them to their inevitable bizarre conclusion. But unfortunately, what we think is bizarre 20, 30 years ago, I mean, seriously, 30 years ago, if you and I had said, okay, so here's what's going to happen. Canada is going to turn into a despotic dictatorship. Australia is going to be locking foreigners into their hotel rooms when they fly freight in, which is happening right now, by the way. And Britain's going to basically become a state where there's surveillance everywhere and completely 1984. And everyone's going to go, okay, and then here we are.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's and a lot of the stuff in the films. That people. There was one woman that called that found, I think, Jake on Facebook and said, "Hey, can you forward this on to Brett or whatever?" And called me a prophet or something because of all the things that I think you're a time traveler and you've actually come back from time to warn us on all this.
Yes, that's exactly who I am. That is what I've done. Xenu loves you.
So. leading us into that's sort of the history of Day of Seven
And
Sisters.
it's a complicated history to talk about. We can't just kind of shoot into it.
Yeah,
you kind of got to get
exactly.
the background on it.
So and the now I'm starting to remember, because we had to do this twice. Did I talk about the birthday on this version of it? So we also know why, my numerology and things don't come from that mysterious psychic or magic tarot card reader or anything. It's just fun.
Yeah.
I like to I lay clues within the numbers. 923. The dates and that became the trying to figure out addresses or the price of a pizza or whatever. What am I going to make the number? Oh, 923. And because there is a secret that you use that number and other things and put the numbers together, and you can see what's going to be happening. So it is well thought out. It's plotted. It's planned. But now, when you get into, for those filmmakers who want to do something like that catastrophic and that devastating,
let's screw up the world.
Exactly. I've tried to minimize what you actually see, because my effects talents aren't really there. But I'll tell you, one of the things that, and DeMarcus sang my praises on that in the original Night Watchman, of having my night shots of the streets of Temple and just deserted and flashing lights, and it just gives this creepy, eerie feeling. So, if you can wake up at 3 a.m. and go and shoot some shots of downtown just deserted, gives it a really cool, eerie feeling that, okay, something's wrong. Yeah. Something's not right. Yeah. Now, when it comes to actually showing the nuclear blasts, and this is something that, going into, especially, after the day and Red Days, I know in the back of my head that when these people, when Sergio steps out of his house with his family and sees the the mushroom cloud in the distance, I am well aware that if they saw it that size, that they would have been vaporized. However, there is the visual aspect of filmmaking, and you want to be able to see the nuke. So that's a difficult balance, and we've talked about that sort of with in terms of your fight in fights.
Right. You have to. There's the come to Jesus that I had to have with regard to specifically the gunfight, specifically armed combat, where the statement's always been gunfights either last 10 seconds or 2 days. There's either 5 or 6 shots, 10 shots, or brigades fighting each other with helicopters and tanks with hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition at each other, which neither advances the plot at all, unless you're filming the Battle of Mogadishu or whatever. But so I had that little come to Jesus where it's like, that's how it is, but I need to tell a story, Jeff. And I'm like, okay, fine, we'll figure this out. And the same thing with your nuclear blast, atomic blast. I mean, yeah, if you have a nuclear, and we're about to split some hairs, so just stay with me. I don't want to get too splitty hairy, but here we go. If you're going to have a nuclear blast, because there's a difference between a nuclear explosion and an atomic explosion. Yes. For those of you who don't know, there's a difference. One's fusion and one's fission. Well, I should say one's fusion, one's fission. So a nuclear blast is you're taking atoms and making them into one, and then an atomic is you're splitting an atom. Those are two different things. And the atomic is the Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and then the nuclear is Moab, the end of Moab, the end of the world. It's I mean, not in Baikonur, but it's the kind of explosion that is just ridiculously powerful and horribly horrible for everything.
Ferocious.
It's ferocious because the idea is that one. They're both releasing an exceptional amount of energy, but one is exponentially more energy. Okay. Now, you could say that the explosion of in Los Angeles, we could just say it was an atomic explosion, and then you're looking at 2-3 miles of really everything just being vaporized, and then you kind of step out.
In the Day of Seven Sisters, they you could call them briefcase nukes, but briefcase nukes don't actually come in a briefcase.
They don't actually. Yeah,
I mean,
they're pretty big.
Yeah, the ones were crates.
Let's
but they were smaller.
Let's remember the first atomic bomb, they had to put it into a B-29, which, by the way, is not a little airplane, and it used the entirety of the runway to actually go off the end of, this is Centennian, go off the end of the runway and then let's go over the water for a bit. They're very, very, very heavy. Okay? Of course, that was also 1945. And we could also use the James Bond board, like the future tech. So nowadays, nuclear weapons or atomic weapons can fit into footlockers. It's fine. Because let's be honest, we've got genetically enhanced women who are doing amazing things.
I have 3 handcuffs on each hand and 2 more on both hands. What about you? You're in what, a rope?
I'm not the one with the genetically enhanced breasts. What?
You just said genetically enhanced breasts.
Oh, yeah, I know.
We can go ahead and figure out how to put a nuclear weapon into a footlocker, right? Sure. Dude's got a computer in his eye. Why can't we have briefcase nukes? I'm good with all this stuff. The future tech, the James Bond future tech. Your Aston Martin have an ejector seat? It does now. Future tech. So that being said, we could go with that, and you could say it was an atomic blast. And then you're talking about the destruction isn't quite as bad. But if you're talking about nuclear blast, you start with leveling cities. It's the difference between like a Volkswagen Bug and an 18-wheeler and another 18-wheeler. We're talking, there's a lot of power in a nuclear blast. Notwithstanding, you still have to tell the story. So you could, as a filmmaker, if you have a way to film or get a video of a nuclear blast, and it's awesome, and you want to put it in your film because you want to put it in, freaking put it in your film. Oh, they all would have died. Yeah, sure, whatever. And scene 2, and just go to the next thing. If you want to be more realistic, you can still do that. You can have it farther away. You can also have a city like the scene of the city where nothing's going on, and you can just have your characters walk, all of a sudden there's a bright flash, and all of a sudden the ground shakes, and then they get blown across the thing. You could do that too, and then who knows how far away the blast was. You can kind of time it with the flash, and then when everything hits, if you want to time the shock wave, which is traveling supersonic, and that's 723 miles an hour, blah, 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 blah. If you want to do all that, you certainly can. But the point is, tell the story. Tell the story you want to tell it. And if you need to put a nuclear blast next door and then have the guys react to it, you know what? Your goddamn movie, you do what you want to do. And if people don't like it, they ain't going to watch. Problem is, you kind of need to not do that because you get people like me who are going to get bounced out of your movie. I can accept that this nuclear blast maybe looks like 2, 3, 4 miles away. Because let's recall, these things are not little. We're not setting off a grenade. This is a nuclear freaking weapon or an atomic weapon. And Hiroshima, they could see that thing for 20... freaking... The B-29s were 7 miles up and 10 miles away. Let's look at some of the testing they did. If you want to do some research, look at some of the testing they did in New Mexico and Arizona and in Hawaii. Or not Hawaii, in Bikini, thank you, the atolls. And look at some of the testing they did and kind of do the math on where things were. And you could, if you want to make it a little more realistic, you can. But the point is, tell your story. Tell the story where you need to tell it. And you should try to make it as scientific as possible, but you're filmmakers, not scientists. Okay, now that could be irritating if you just totally... Once again, the whole rules of the universe, let's remember, as we've talked about this, you can't just go bat crazy. You kind of need to stick with some kind of whatever. But the point is, in your movie, or specifically talking about the Seven Sisters, they walk out and they see a big mushroom cloud X number of miles away. Okay, you can also use the science, the future science. Well, yeah, but when you would add uranium and orichalcum, makes a big blast, but the shock wave isn't as strong. Why not? Sure, okay. It's a sciencey thing that has anyone used orichalcum to make a nuclear device? Nope. Is there orichalcum to use? Mm-hmm. If you had orichalcum, would it make a nuclear device? But you know what? This is the canon you've established, that orichalcum and uranium, when mixed together, makes a nuclear blast that creates zombies. A plus B equals zombie. Why not? And just go with that. And that's perfectly okay. It's your story. So you can.
It's a rule of your universe.
It's a rule of your universe. That's the rule you've established. Superman, yellow sun. No one knows how an X-wing works. Your nuclear device doesn't have a very big blast radius because of orichalcum. Ta-da! Congratulations, you've made the rules of your universe, and we're all going to go with it.
Well, you know, that's a great little point to bring up. And when you get criticisms of our films, you take like Lady Lawman. Some of the majority of criticism was, oh, well, this saddle is this, or that saddle is this. And it drives some people nuts. But then you come over to like the Innocent Saga or Red Days or anything like that, and a nuke with orichalcum made zombies. Nobody complains about that.
Because nuclear physics is a lot more difficult than douchebags who have horses. Okay, let's just give an example. Here in the state of Texas, the number of people who've seen horses as opposed to the number of people who've seen atomic explosions. So they can say, well, that saddle doesn't do that, and that horn's like that, and you need to have the thing. Yeah, nuclear explosions make zombies awesome. How does that work? Yay! Pretty lights, blood, titties. You know, you have to understand the difference is that these people are douchebags because they can't help themselves, and the people over here who actually, are smart are like, that's pretty cool. Because there's no science for creating zombies. I mean, I guess there is, but also the science says they can't exist because, flies and putrefaction and Texas. So if there's an army of dead walking around, just go to your house, wait 2 days, wait 2-3 days. By the end of the second day, the smell will get you like, all the zombies apparently have blown up because Texas. Because if you've
the gases, the wild hogs.
If you've ever seen a dog that got hit on the side of the road, you can look at it and go, oh, just hit, 2 days, and oh. You see what I'm saying? And so you can science.
That's even so much more. Ryan Hassel is probably quivering in her boots right now because in the last episode we were just talking about in episode 8 of the Innocent Saga how after she tried to get us in the desert, Tara shot her and we just drove away. so we basically left Laura's corpse out there in the hot desert sun.
Well, see, the thing is, in that case, since it's so dry, she's probably going to desiccate and turn into a mummy. Not an exploding dead body. You're fine. I mean, you're going to look like Tutankhamun, but you're not going to be, Now, if it had been Texas, oh yeah, you're worm food and you would have exploded in 2 days and, whatever else. But in the desert, you're just going to turn into a mummy. You're fine.
Well, it was the Texas.
Oh, never mind. You're dead. You're done. And also the hogs would have gotten you mostly.
So you're welcome, Ryan.
Don't worry about it, honey. You're still hog food. I mean, you're cute, but you're hog food. So anyway, yeah. So like I said, there's a certain difference between getting bounced out of a movie because of poor science and everything like that, and you can make that distinction. But the bigger thing is tell the story within reason, but tell the story you want to tell, and the rest of it. I mean, we're all looking at future imperfect science fiction, science fiction zombies, nuclear with orichalcum. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter if you get the science. Because I watched that thing, and the nuclear blast went off, or the atomic bomb went off, and they're standing there looking at it, and I'm like, they may get vaporized. And I was kind of thinking to myself, why didn't they get vaporized? And also used orichalcum. Oh, orichalcum. Well, who the hell knows what that stuff? And I was okay with it because I was first watching it like, if it's an atomic blast, they're going to get their houses are going to get leveled because they're within they were at least within between 3 and 5 miles, so they're not going to get vaporized, but their it's going to get all f***ed up. And then it didn't, and I was like, But then we talk about orichalcum and then the zombies, and I'm like, oh, it's like James Bond, future tech. No one knows what it does. And so I kind of let that part of the story go, and then I could kind of in my mind go, oh, it was because it was orichalcum. Everything's different now. And so you kind of do that. Yeah. Because X-Wings fly and no one knows how.
Yeah. In the original After the Day, the nuke was pretty big, and that I just really wasn't kind of caring. In Red Days, when we did the remake, I got my shot. And then I was like, okay, I want to make it real. It's all right. I was going to be okay with it kind of being in the distance, just a tiny little thing. But if you look right out here where I got my shot, there's this big ass tree right there. So it extended so much over the horizon. I was like, well, I can't see the nuke with that tree. So in order to be able to see it, it would have to be higher. So as the higher it went, the bigger the nuke had to be.
Yeah.
So it was sort of just okay. Well, that's the way it's
going to be.
So that's the way that worked out.
That's fine.
And there are other things that, and especially when it comes to film, like in the end of chapter 6 of the saga, when everything gets nuked. San Antonio. Just on the outskirts of San Antonio, one of the nukes goes off, and Rose and Hank are in Donovan's office watching the nuke, and they're seeing the blast wave come to them.
They're well within 3 miles.
Yeah, and when there's a little bit of crosstalk and a little bit of banter, I know that if that nuke had gone up, they'd be gone within a few seconds.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, but they have that chance to have the little dialogue,
Right.
and he says hey, is it can I get
How immortal is immortal?
Yeah. So that is taking liberty with the writing to be able to,
and some science and stuff. And once again, I watched it knowing the science was off, and I went,
Yeah.
It's a good scene. And I like that scene. And it still happened. I mean, you slowed the speed of sound down like to 300 miles an hour. And I'm like, maybe it's just a very dead clear day. Is the speed of sound 300 miles an hour? But it's a good scene, so who cares?
Yeah. So I guess in the end, remember, and that's something I think that some people are forgetting what movies are.
Right.
It's why I can sit back and I can actually enjoy a Fast and Furious movie. Because I go in, turn my brain off, and go, okay, I just want to see crazy...
People do bad, crazy things, yeah.
Yeah. And then there are movies where, if I were to watch Tin Soldier, or Tinker
Soldier... Hell, something, Soldier Spy.
Yeah.
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
and something like that would happen. Then I'd be like, wait a minute. So... If you're making a film, understand that it is there to be fun, have a good time, or be realistic. Pick one or the other. You can mix and match. Movies aren't real. They're entertainment.
Yeah.
Be entertained and stop bitching about the little things.